All right, everybody, welcome back to the dojo. Take off your shoes and take a seat on the mat. We have a pretty awesome guy with us today. I stumbled across his stuff actually on YouTube and just noticed that he was on public land taking down some really impressive bucks. And then throughout the last year or so, I've been able to chat with him a couple times and actually meet him in person. And he's just a real genuine person. And I think that that means a lot in this space right now. So Brian Rogers, um, also with Good Sit Mobile, man. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy, excuse me.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I stumbled across you on your YouTube page and I was really impressed. I mean, you've taken some giants off of public there and I mean, I'm looking at one right now. It's a 172-inch buck and then, there's a 150-inch buck here and um I guess can you give us a little bit of background on how you even got to that point where you're slaying these amazing creatures on public land?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird because growing up, idolizing people that were shooting deer, bigger deer, quality deer, it was always the guys on private. And
Mhm.
so I never even saw it as something where I could consistently do public. And so there were many years where I would kind of go back and forth between like just hunting my best spots on private during the best times of the year and looking at public as a second option. So for me, the big switch came 2016 ish, back whenever I was hunting this private piece. And like what always happens, it doesn't matter what private piece you get. There's always that guy on the private piece that you get, and I'm sure everybody out there can relate. There's always old man, Willie that gets this corner, or there's always this neighbor that doesn't want you hunting over, next to his food plot on the other side or something like that. And so I had just been dealing with that and had always thought that that was the best route. Was like, this is where you kill big deer is on private. But really, if you don't have the right private piece, like if you don't have it how those guys have it on TV, where you can keep everybody out, keep your food plots unpressured and things of that nature, a lot of the times it's not the better option. And it only became clear to me after I shot a big buck on a private piece, and then the neighbor who I thought was my buddy went and made problems, got me kicked off the landowner's thing, and or off the landowner's land. And once that kind of turned me off so much that I just totally refocused all my energy towards public and said, you know what? I'm only hunting public every single day from now on, rain or shine, good, bad, or ugly. I'm sticking to this, and a little bit of kind of like I'm going to get some vengeance on these private land queens that want to claim all these deer. I want to go and I want to snag their deer and I want to drag them, off of the public and take them out that way. And that's not really a jab at every private land guy out there because I know there's a lot of good dudes out there. But at the time, younger, more angry me, that was part of the motivation. So
Yeah. So
and
when did you start hunting?
so I started hunting. I mean, I was hunting from the time I was like 6 or 7, going along rabbit hunting, squirrel hunting with my uncles, my cousins, stuff like that. Back in the day, before social media, that's basically what we had to do.
Yeah.
That and TV. So it was that, TV, or get in trouble, and I did a little bit of all three when I was younger. But deer hunting, slowly, I started off hunting private, shotgunning. Took me forever to even see a deer close enough to shoot at, and then started my public land hunting when I was 15, 16 with a bow.
Mhm.
And actually, like I was telling you before we started, this guy here was my first deer with a bow, the old Easton game getter, the black bear. And A lot of guys back then, especially like me, looked at it like the second option. Now, God, I would give
Yeah.
anything to go back to before everybody knew what we know now. And
Yeah.
going, not honestly though, on that same mindset, I think this over amount of information actually helps us too, because then it guides everybody to the same spots. And if you go in there and do your due diligence, you end up still finding the deer. So,
Yeah, yeah. So you said when did you get on public in 2016? And then
well, I'd been hunting public a lot my whole
just
life,
on and off.
but it was like, oh, it's the rut. I'm gonna go hunt this 200-acre piece of timber where, I think I have a better chance at killing deer. And sometimes I would still throw rut hunts on the public. But back then too, it was just more like, this is a bedding area, not this is a buck bed, or this, I didn't understand what time of year necessarily did to, just knew the rut. And I thought of it as this one big long process, like started late October, ended in November. And while there's some truth to that, there's so many little segments of it that you kind of want to look at differently and hunt differently that you don't realize until you really delve in with the trail cams. And that's where 2018, 2019, that's where my uh, hunting really started to elevate, because I started mixing the scouting with large scale trail cam data, analysis. And when you add those two things together, you can't help but learn.
Yeah. How many cameras are you running?
I run somewhere around the 40 mark now, 35 to 40, but not in one area. Because you hear
Yep.
guys like, oh my God, he's got 40 cameras in one spot. Like, I will blast cameras in a small area, but that's usually 5 to 7 cameras when I'm learning an area and I'm scouting and I'm finding specific scrapes or rub lines and things like that. I'll blast an area, but usually the first year, on a 200-acre chunk, let's say there's 7 cameras. Then the next year it goes down to maybe 5, and then after that I might only run two cameras in that area, because I have those 2 key locations that I know deer might hit, and I've already figured out how they work in that area. So I don't no longer need to run, 7 cameras in that area. So what happens is you go into an area, you look at it as, kind of a marathon, not a sprint. And once you reach that 2 to 4 year mark in there, you're killing deer. You don't need as many cameras, so you can put those resources in newer places. So,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So you're using the cameras, and then I'm gonna just address the big sign sitting behind you in your sweatshirt there. And you got
oh
good
yeah,
sit, yeah, you got good sit mobile, and
yep.
and you make some pretty awesome camera hangers amongst other things. I mean, I've got one of your products right here for the GoPro that I use when I'm out there. This thing's pretty sweet, weighs nothing, um, packs away super nice, gets on the tree, and I don't have to worry about the GoPro anymore. But so at what point did Good Sit get involved with all this as you're starting to evolve and go through that?
So if you run a lot of cameras, as I know you do, like
Hmm.
me,
Yep.
um, there was just this opening in the market of, like, there's just this constant. I'm out there hanging cameras, and it was just taking too long,
Yes.
and it was taking too long and too much energy. So I have small kids, a very full life, as far as work, hunting, was already doing the YouTube and stuff like that. And I just didn't have the time. I only get like 7 days a year to scout and hang all these cameras. And even then, a lot of times it doesn't, I don't end up getting them all out. So it's usually a mad dash to try and make sure that I'm timing it right with the weather and stuff. So anyway, also, if you have kids, like I know you do,
Hmm.
the days that you get to go out are the crappy weather days, because the good weather days you want to spend with your kids. The 75-degree and sunny day, you're at the park, or you're, taking them to Shields or whatever you're doing. You're hanging out with them because you want to give them the good time and not be tired, sweaty, bugs, all that stuff. So, what does that leave us dads? That leaves us with 95 degrees, scorching, nasty.
Yeah.
Um, Covered in poison ivy, covered in mosquitoes, like, just miserable. And the last thing you want to do is also wear yourself out, finding a stick and then figuring out how you're going to get it angled right, getting up, getting down. So I had to simplify the process. And quick product plug, since you already brought them up.
No, it's worth it.
We have the screw stick, which is a universal trail cam mount, and that mounts on the back of any camera. And it has like it has a bubble level in it, and then it has this stick right here, which will screw into here, and then set your pitch and then also lock it into the tree so that critters can't mess with it. So, and then also another big key here, probably my favorite thing, the laser
Yeah.
pointer. That right there, you don't even have to attach it to the camera. You could literally just take this little piece along with you and hold it up to your lens, and you'll get uh, pinpoint accuracy of where your camera is pointed. So, and then there's a third part to the system, and that is this little clip here with a sliding prusik, and it's pretty seamless. You just throw it up, put it on, set your knob, check it with your laser, and then leave.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I needed at the time, and nobody was making it. So I got with the guy who knew what he was doing 3D printing wise. I knew what I wanted. We prototyped a bunch of prototypes, and this is what we came up with. So
Yeah, it's awesome. I I I won't mention a product or even set it up to be mentioned unless I really think it's unique and like is awesome. And as soon as I seen that, man, I immediately thought of how many times I've taken I my son will come with me every once in a while, and I have him running in front of the camera trying to find the right angle. I'm waiting for my cell. A lot of these places I go into, like it takes a long time to get feedback from the cell. It's taken me an hour, sometimes to hang up one camera to get it just right because I hunt a lot out of state. And, when I go, I want to make sure that I've got everything perfect before I leave because I don't want to drive all the way back to fix it because all of a sudden the angle's wrong. So when I saw that, man, I was like, this is genius. It is such a great product. It's a real innovative product that will really help you. There's so many products out there that really aren't going to up your game or really do a whole lot for you. This one will. And I want to go back a little bit to what you were saying. You said 7 days to get out there, hang your cameras, do your scouting. That's pretty incredible. I mean, is that still the case? Are you still putting in about 7 days throughout the year to get it all done?
yep. So that's so like and by the way, I forgot to congratulate you on your buck when we started this because that's a pretty amazing accomplishment what you did. So
Oh,
um,
appreciate that. Thanks.
you know, I've killed some big deer, but I wanted to point out that you killed an amazing deer. So but yeah, so it's kind of like I already feel like when I'm deer hunting that I give too much to it comparatively to my family, right?
Hmm.
So I feel even more selfish giving any kind of days in the summer that I could be spending with them. That's why I give, the crappy weather days where everybody's inside on their tablets.
Hmm.
I don't feel as bad about doing that because they don't want to go outside anyway.
Yep.
They don't even want to look up from their tablet at the time. As we try to limit screen time, but there's some days where it's like, what the heck else are you going to do? You're going to watch a show, you're going to color, you might do some math, but ultimately, there's not a whole lot you can do. So for me, if I get a really hot day, that's the time I get, and usually it has to also fall on one of my days off. So that's why I say is I try to fit that in that late July and all of August. So somewhere in there, I'm trying to get those set up.
Yeah, yeah. So in the beginning of this, before we hit record, I was talking about a need to kind of touch on, two different audiences. And, there's guys that can go out there and pour in a bunch of time and, they may not have the same type of requirements or responsibilities. And some do, and they're able still to get out there and do it, and that's great. And then I was talking about I think a large group of population who they don't have much time to do it. But then hearing you say that you're doing that in 7 days, it really says to me that you can get out there and really improve your odds, and you can change your season for next year. And it may not result in the exact same results that you're getting, but you're going to increase your results if you get out there even 7 days and you're intentional and you put in the work. So
Let me add to that though. Um, 7 days for the scouting and the
yep.
hanging, but 365 days I'm focused on whitetail. So when the kids go to bed, I'm focused on whitetails. After they get dropped off at school, I'm focused on whitetails as much as I can away from my job, my wife, stuff like that. Any free time that's just dad's time, that is whitetail time. So you won't see me at a barbecue. You won't see me out fishing. You won't see me like doing anything else. And it's not because it's not because I want to be there and I can't. It's because the only thing I want to do is chase whitetails. So
Yeah.
you kind of hear that thing about obsession. And that it really is. I mean, if you excel in anything, you have to be obsessed. And so for me, it never ends. However, the time that I'm actually allotted to do my work is that 7 day period. So I'm map scouting all the time and I'm plotting out my route for those days. So it's not just go out, fumble around the woods. It's I'm going with intent. And I think anytime you kill big deer consistently, it's with you're doing it intentional. Doesn't mean there can't be that outlier, or you can't. If you wanted to just go out and hunt without any of this stuff and just try it, you're gonna have some success, especially as you grow and learn that. And if you become obsessed with doing it that way, that could work for you. But basically, you're never going to just stumble into consistently killing
Mhm.
big deer, and that is something that you you don't understand until you have that aha moment of putting in a shit ton of work and having it pay off.
Mhm.
Because up until that point, you think that you're doing enough. You're out there and you're just like, man, I hope that a deer, like you have these dreams of these big deer come by. And it's a weird thing after you put in the work and you start killing them consistently, it doesn't mean as much to you because you expect it to happen.
Yeah.
Because it's not that like, I hope I win the lottery killing a big deer. It's like, I have a fair shot at killing a big deer today. And I know that because I put in the work. So,
I think that's key for people who really want to increase their success rate. Um, I started to commit over the last few years, last 5 years or 6 years, not to really sit unless I felt like I was gonna kill. Like I like
mhm.
like I felt like I was in the game, and sometimes that meant, I'd start to go out because my styles for many years was headed to a spot I've never been before. I did like you, 365. I'm on maps. I'm obsessing that way, but I didn't have time to go out of state and do the scouting. So I would go and at times I that meant I walked through and I didn't set that day, because I didn't feel like I was going to be in the spot. And then, but I tell you what, when you start doing that and you change that mindset, it feels good sitting. You're not hoping anymore. You're not wishing upon a star, and you're waiting for that moment to happen.
And then when the deer comes too, you're more prepared because
Yes.
you actually expect it to happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whereas before you're like, shit, this isn't going to work out. I have no idea where I'm at right now. Like I just saw two trails come. I set up a tree stand, on the downwind side. Now anything can happen at any time the deer would. So there's probably those guys that can go out there and do that, but without putting in the work, and maybe they tend to luck into them, or skill into them by knowing how to read sign and stuff like that. I'm not disregarding anybody's success. I just know that I am not special, right? So nothing about me is anything that anybody else can't do. You just have the only thing that I notice is everybody, like not everybody, but the 90% of guys that don't kill talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. So
Yeah.
as long as you get your ass up, do the work, it's not hard to replicate my success.
You want to kind of go through, you say you're doing, Whitetails 365. Can you give an outline of what that looks like, maybe by season or by month or however you want to do it, just kind of working through the year?
Yep.
What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So basically, like right now, when it's cold out, when it's really, really cold, I'm not wasting my time and energy out there. Like when it's brutally cold, like, when it drops below zero, I'm not going out there and wasting my time because I feel like your return on investment is really low. Your mind is not sharp like you want it to be, and you're not getting the quality time in the woods that you need. So I like to wait till it gets to be 20s, 30s, somewhere in there before I'm going to do any kind of postseason scouting. And some guys might say that's a wussy's take on it, but I feel like you can be uh, you know doing stuff around your house, doing some gear prep, like from the every single day of the season and after the season, I'm constantly reevaluating what is working and what is not working on my system. So whether it be how my truck is set up, saddle is set up, how things are set up easily to get to on my saddle, whether it be my entire tree stand system, I'm constantly trying to simplify and make things work in my favor when I'm out there. And the only way you can know if that's going to work is to do the work out there in the woods by going hunting and testing out your theories and then coming back and adjusting. And so through years of doing that too, I have an extremely streamlined system for when I go hunting. And I feel like nowadays with the mobile hunting community, that's nothing new because everybody is
Mhm.
kind of aiming at that. But and everybody thinks that they have the best, most streamlined system, right? And again, I don't think I'm special in that. I just have something that works for me. I have talks with guys all the time that think I'm crazy for doing a hybrid setup, and they're guys that I really like and respect, but they're like, I don't understand why you would not pick one or the other. And for me, it just makes way more sense because it doesn't limit me
Mhm.
in my tree selection. It doesn't limit me in giving me more options to sit, stand, things like that. But so I'll go from gear prep and uh, postseason scouting. I take a little bit of a break during turkey season, but even when I'm turkey hunting, I'm looking at deer sign, I'm looking for sheds, you know what I mean? So I kind of think of that as an extension of my postseason scouting, even though you're starting to get some green up by the end. And then I will usually go and start getting my trail cams prepped right after turkey season. If I haven't dumped all the SDs and organized all my data from the time before, that's the other thing I'll do in the winter is organize all my trail cam data too. But then in the early summer, I'm getting all my trail cams prepped. I'm doing map scouting, studying stuff like that. What I want to do. What did I do last year that worked? What did I do last year that didn't work? And was this camera not active because of the food source not being there that year? I'm just analyzing a lot of things and then trying to put together a plan. Okay, so these cameras need to go out first. These cameras need to go out second. A lot of the times I try to get my cells out first in case I have any issues. I have enough time to get into those areas and go and mess with them, but not always. Sometimes I'll save a couple of cells for, you're out there scouting that new piece. Later on, you find something that pops up and you have to throw that cell over that too. So usually, this is my first 2 years running cells. I ran 10 last year and 5 the year before, but I try to save those for either hub scrapes or scrapes on like either side of doe bedding that aren't as noticeable. And then, I'll throw my SDs in areas kind of surrounding that in key locations, like maybe fence crossings or creek
Mhm.
crossings or things like that. More time, more areas that I don't necessarily like. If this one craps out, I'll still get information from this one. But if I get both of them, I'll have a huge idea of what's going on in that area. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'm figuring that out. And then once I get into about the September area, I'm no longer, I'm trying to cut it off at about the September 1st area for cameras because I want that month for all of that stuff to settle. And then I go into like driving around, glassing, going out, glassing fields, stuff like that, and then on into the season.
Do you glass at all during the summer? Are you on bean fields or anything?
See, so for me, no, because I I'm so focused. It's kind of crazy because like I'll go out right before season and try and get a bead on things, but to say that I've ever killed a deer based off of that, I haven't.
Yeah.
I kill all of my deer in the moment, reading sign, studying data, and then bulldogging it and kind of grinding it out in areas that I know to be true, even if they don't have the sign there.
Wow. That's really interesting. And that's over, you know them to be true because you've invested years into those areas,
Right.
right? Yep.
Well,
Okay.
and sometimes it could be the first year because if you read the sign right, you set your cameras right, and then go in there and execute it correctly, you can kill that first year. But generally, by year 2 to 4, I should have killed something in there. Like if I haven't had opportunities in there, I'm writing that whole area off
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
because I mean,
sense.
there's something wrong if I can't figure that area out in 2 to 4 years. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. So what do you say to a guy who's only got 5 cameras and he wants to implement what you're doing? What Where should he focus those cameras at? I know it's kind of a broad, question,
Mm-hmm.
but is
So
there
yeah, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead. Is there any kind of general locations that they should focus on?
Yeah. So my whole thing is when here's the thing for the guys that are just starting out and you can't tell a deer by his hoof print, like, oh, that's old Joe from, this bedding area and stuff like that. Right. In the beginning, it doesn't make sense to you as much. And that's okay. Because we're all still learning and trying to figure this whole thing out as we go along. But for us to have slightly more of a grasp on things like that, you might put your cameras in different locations. But if you're just trying to kill that nice 2, 3, 4-year-old deer, you don't care what it is, you're really looking for those rut locations that are good every year. Because an early season location, it takes a little bit more skill to slip
Mhm.
in closer to that buck, right? So everybody wants to ride the cool train of what's going on, but if you really just want to get some kills going on under your belt, you need to focus on that rut time frame, because that's when those bucks are extremely killable, especially once the giant old bucks have the does locked down. Those younger, less bucks are going to be running around like chickens with their head cut off in certain areas, constantly. And so if you put 5 days in one of those areas with the wind in your favor, the chances of you getting a shot are phenomenal.
Mhm.
So that being said, if I had 5 cameras and I was not necessarily chasing, the 7-year-old, Uncle Eddie deer, and I'm just going after a nice, respectable 3, 4-year-old, 130, maybe 140-inch deer, I'm focusing on, little crossings by doe bedding, usually like southern, northern side, and trying to run cameras on those crossings near doe bedding, sometimes in doe bedding, and then trying to take inventory of what time of year exactly that it got hot. Like, was this getting hot from the 25th through the 30th? Was this only hot from like the 2nd of November through the 5th? Some of them can be hot all year round, but you're going to notice patterns in specific bedding areas based off of when certain does come into estrus that are year after year. And so what you're trying to do with your cameras, if you only have 5, is find as many of those locations as you can, monitor them, and then stack the odds in your favor the next year. So you're looking at it as this marathon thing of, it's not necessarily right now. It's what I'm going to learn in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, yeah, really good. Um, just touching base on that a little bit. I think that's been the bread and butter to my success, and I've said it every podcast so far. If you're looking to get those, you know, 3, maybe 4-year-old, I'll go down as far as 120 inch because I think a lot of guys haven't even gotten there yet.
Which is a
120,
huge accomplishment. Actually, when I killed my first 120-inch deer, I was probably more excited about that than any deer I've ever killed. So
yeah,
it's hard to break that barrier of killing 1-year-old deer, 2-year-old maybe, to hit, over that 120 barrier. It's a huge accomplishment. So
yeah, I think so too. I mean, I've done it. I've done it for a lot of years. Like I was doing that for quite some time, and what my secret to success was going to states that had those bucks, had, good buck doe ratio, had more mature bucks, the more likelihood that I was going to run into 120, 130, 140-inch buck. And I did, sat down, downwind of doe bedding and pinch points, really basic stuff. And I put in the time, and I would put in 10 to 14 days. Um, and for me at the time, I had younger kids because that was the only time that I got to go. And my success rate just jumped way up. So to get to that level, it's not that hard. You can go out and do those things. I wasn't successful every year, but I was successful a lot of years doing that, and I had a lot of encounters, and I learned a lot, and it allowed me to go to the next level after that. So, and then running cameras, what I would do is I would actually run cell cams too in those areas because I could then get the data right away. I knew when a spot was starting to get hot, and I could go in and make a move. So really good advice there. I really appreciate you jumping in like that. So now you got the cameras up. Kind of, you're saying focus on that rut time for those guys who don't have as much experience. Are you doing any early season stuff now? For you, like is that part of your game plan now? Are you going
so
after them?
early season's always been a part of my game plan, but it's always been the weakest part of my game plan, because I think, and I've talked about this before, but your rut mentality and your early season mentality are so wildly different,
Yeah,
that guys who are really good early season tend to suck, not suck, but just struggle in the rut. And me, I'm really good in the rut, and I struggle early season. Not that I haven't killed some deer, and not that I don't understand the game. I think it's because I bulldog it too much and I tend to go too far.
yeah,
Um, and that's, whereas the guys who are really good at early season are good at staggering it and getting in and figuring everything out and striking at just that right point. Whereas with the rut, you can kill big deer on a what do you call it, on a pattern. It's just a wider pattern, and there is a little bit more room for error if you can expose that pattern. You can get in a little bit easier a lot of the times, because oftentimes have moved from the best bedding cover to the best bedding cover that's near does,
Mm,
and that's not the same thing, right? So your best bedding cover is far away from everybody in the thickest, nastiest place that nobody goes. But we all know that that's not where does live, right? They live in good, thick cover, but we see does all the time.
mhm.
And so when they have to move in close to does, that's when it makes them a little bit more susceptible. And killing them coming back to their beds then is much easier, or coming out of their beds, one or the other, is much easier than killing them coming out of their beds when they are totally focused on food and survival. So hats off to the early season guys. And when I have killed early season deer, it's meant a lot to me because I felt really good. But it's also funny to watch those guys struggle because they want to be so precise in the rut, and there's kind of this like fly by the seat of your ass,
Yeah.
figure it out as you go mentality in the rut. And sometimes there's this effort mentality too, like, I believe in this, I'm going to make it happen even though nothing else is pointing to this. So it's just two different mentalities.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I agree with
So
that.
and actually guys that love hunting early season hate hunting the rut. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I agree with that. I tend to be more bulldogish. I'm more rut focused. I've done some early season stuff over the last couple years now, and I can do it, but it takes a lot of concentration, and I wouldn't say I'm good at it. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I prefer the rut because I actually feel more active during the rut. Like I like to kind of go in and even kick up some. I mean, with a plan, but even kick up some deer and kind of get into the mix of it and see where things are at. And over time, you can do that much more like less intrusive. You can get in there. But um, so you said I'm trying to think here. There was something you said I wanted to point out. You I think, yeah, you nailed on it. It was the fact that the two mentalities are different. One is more of a finesse mentality. The other is more is this kind of aggressive, getting in their mentality. I'd like to kind of transition into your hunts for this year because um, those are pretty interesting. I was looking at some of the areas that you were in, and man, they looked super thick. So you had a fantastic year this year. You killed 2 bucks. Did you kill them like 8 days apart from each other?
Yeah, but they were on back-to-back hunts. So
Okay.
uh, it was the end of my first week of vacation, the last day, and then it was the first day of my second vacation. So those just happened to, coincide with each other. That's when it was. But yeah, it was November 1st on the one, and then November 9th on the second one.
So do you want to unpack those? So I think it was at the November 1st hunt. Did I hear you say like you weren't really seeing much up until that time? Is that correct?
Yeah, so and I'm sure other guys have talked about this to you, and maybe you even know, but the acorn crop was ridiculous this year, at
Yeah.
least here and other places. And I think that has led to a much harder earlier season leading up to it, because I wasn't seeing as much sign laid down. I wasn't getting stuff on my cameras because they weren't having to travel very far. Not And also I want to just kind of cover a quick thing where people are right now are drawing back from technology and cameras, and I get that, I respect it, but I think that when people hear us say that we use a lot of cameras, they think that that's the only way that we know how to hunt. And I'd like to put a disclaimer out there that I hunted without cameras for a long time and killed some big deer. But there's no denying that if you have limited time and you want to figure out how to get on deer, and especially if you want to get on specific deer and know the caliber of deer that's in your area, cameras are huge. And, we could debate that all day, back and forth on the good or the bad. But I just want to point out that I'm hearing a lot of negative stuff on the camera side of like, well, that makes you not a woodsman and stuff like that. Cameras don't kill the deer for you. So, like I know 90% of people run cameras and still don't kill big deer. So you still have to put in the work with the cameras. And I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, so I had huge acorn crop, which again, these aren't really excuses because people are still killing deer. I always say that no matter what your excuse is, somebody is killing a big deer every day of the season, right?
Mhm.
So I don't care if you live in Alabama, Pennsylvania, Michigan, If it's hot, it's cold, the crop, somebody is figuring it out, and you just need to do that work. But just like, you'll hear EHD, those things will absolutely make it harder for you to kill a deer. And so if you're not killing deer, you don't want to be as hard on yourself, but understand that you don't also want to just totally rely on saying, well, that's why, right? So I don't know. It's kind of this thing where it's like, okay, no one cares. Shut up, work harder. You've heard that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I tell myself all the time is like, yeah, you have all these things going on, but you can still kill a deer if you really apply yourself. And that being said, deer beat me in the early season. I didn't see a single deer over a 3-pointer. So I was grinding it out, and every single time that I would get somewhere, it would be like I would get to the tree I was at, the wind would shift, and I would hear a snort. And then I'd
Yeah.
get up in the tree and something would snort again. And it was just like one of those years where you're like, all right, this is it. This is that one out of every 5 to 2 out of every 10 years where I'm going to have a crappy year no matter what I do. You know what I mean? But I'm just going to keep grinding and see what happens. So up until that point, I had not seen a good deer outside of at a scrape in the moonlight an hour and a half before dark. I had 2 big bucks, one dog and a doe, one hitting the scrape and went by me at about 40 yards in the moonlight, which was kind of a cool experience in and of itself. But
Yeah. So that day you're talking about rut locations. This one's on November 1. What do you classify that? Are you in the rut at that point? Or are you still in pre-rut?
so it's so right about so like the 20, like these dates are talked about a lot, but
Yeah.
just from my trail cam stuff, the 25th of October through about November 3rd to 5th, right? Usually I classify like the 25th through November 5th, continually getting better,
Hmm.
right? 31st being 30th, 31st being that pop, that really big pop of big mature deer on their feet more. And then right somewhere in that 3rd to 5th area, they lock down. They start locking down. And I call it, there's like a dead zone in there from like the 3rd or 5th up through like the 8th or 9th. And doesn't mean you can't kill deer in there. Some people's favorite deer is November 7th, or favorite day
Hmm.
is November 7th. I've killed deer on November 7th, big deer. And it just really depends on that year, I think, because like you'll hear fawn studies of like they'll drop 2 days before or 2 days after. So I always think it can go 2 days either way. It doesn't have to do with the moon or anything like that, but I think that each year, for whatever reason, they can be bred a couple days on the either side of those days. Is when like the majority of the breeding starts and continues. So for me, that time frame, November 1st, was still that pre-rut period where he's really ramped up. So I was still targeting outside of those doe bedding points where they meet up with those scrapes on the either side of your doe bedding. So I was targeting that, and sure enough, 5 does came in. I hear him grunting. 16 minutes later, he comes around downwind of me, or downwind of the does, in between me and him, which is kind of how I had it manufactured. I was on the other side of a little ditch there. And whenever he came in, though, because it was so calm and still, some of my scent had dissipated down and was you could just uh you can just tell when those big old mature bucks know that something's not right, and it's because he caught just a whiff of something and started acting squirrely. So
So I got 2 questions. One, how are you identifying doe bedding? Are you using that with your camera data or just visually when you're doing your scouting?
yeah, so let's say you go in somewhere and it's it's got a big open thicket, right? It's usually a pretty good indication that you're going to have doe bedding, especially if you have bedding points with cover, that are closer to ag, and not even necessarily closer to ag, but just a more generalized area of bedding, right? You're going to get a lot of does bedding in there. It doesn't mean that bucks won't bed in there too, but your big old mature bucks are probably going to find their own little side nook somewhere where they don't get messed with, somewhere where they can watch the danger and stuff like that. And sometimes it is in doe bedding, but um, once you run your cameras, you should be able to tell too with the sign, because you're going to see rub lines, going along the edge of that.
Hmm.
A lot of the times, I like to focus in on what I call the exit movement of rub lines, where they meet up, and especially like where I killed that first one. and close to where I killed that second one. Um, you get these doe bedding scrapes that might not have the earth pawed up, but they have a licking branch, and you have to really know what you're looking for because you don't just have that scrape down at the
Yep.
base of it. So, but if you can find that intersection of movement with your rubs and stuff like that on the edge of thick cover, that's a really good place to put your camera, and then you can watch, and you're getting a lot of does, and you're not getting any bucks. And then all of the sudden, end of October, you're starting to get bucks. Well, then you know that's specifically a doe bedding area, and they're coming in there, during that rut time frame. The other thing to note is you may even find buck beds in there. But what happens is guys try to hunt those like they do early season buck beds, and the bucks aren't in there. So you have to identify, is this buck bed near doe bedding and kind of overlooking it, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of the times they're moving in closer to where they can monitor those doe groups. But if you hunt that too early, you're just screwing it up.
Hmm.
So you really need, that's where your cameras come in, dialing in that time of year, because you can think you know what's going on, but when you run a camera, you definitely know what's going on. And then the next year or that year, if you go in and check it and it hasn't had anything on it, then you know, like, hey, there's does in here. These rub lines were made from bucks that were cruising. This bed was made from a buck that was coming in close to the rut, getting ready to come in and check these does.
Yeah. So you talked about pinch points into those bedding areas. So did I think I heard you say were you hunting a drainage ditch that was coming
Yep.
off of that? And
Yep.
so the bucks are then being pinched into it as they go across the top of that
Yeah.
drainage.
So basically, you have a wide open like hub at the bottom of the drainage, right? Where you
Hmm.
have hills coming together, and that's more wide open, and it looks good to hunt. But that's not really where those big bucks feel safe during daylight. You go up one of the side drainages, and it tightens up. Now you have a really narrow little valley where wind can swirl down in there, and they're more hidden from that open bottom, right?
Hmm.
So you have bucks that are going to bed on those points and drop down and hit those scrapes and stuff like that. But then I follow that drainage up because I run a camera down in that hub scrape down there for inventory. But I generally don't plan on hunting it because of that the wind factor. You're going to get busted down in there unless you have a perfect wind shooting down the drainage. But even then, you get that just off
Yeah.
gust and you're screwed. So what I do is I'll use that for inventory, but I shoot up to the top of that drainage, and then once you get up to the top, you still have a little bit of like what do you call it, like ditches and drainages coming together in this like little like kind of bowl area up at the top, but it flattens out up near the clear cut.
Yep.
And so then you have a bunch of points coming off where they're bedding, and also using those clear cuts to travel as well. But those bucks will have scrapes on either side of those up at the top, and often they're not very noticeable to like your novice hunter. So what you want to be looking for is those licking branches that have been used year in, year out. So you'll see like the new growth, like where it gets, like it'll break and then regrow and stuff like that. And that's how you can really tell a well-used licking branch from something that they just happened to go by and hit one time.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. So tell us more about the day. So you're up there and you have some does come through. Is that
Hmm.
correct? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have a couple does come through. I was worried because I had the wind in my face, but I was worried if the does got behind me, even though they were on top of the ridge, if they were going to get a whiff of something and not like it. But two of them went past and everything was good. And those other three stayed there. And I should add too, the day before it was extremely windy. And so as I was leaving the night before, I saw all these fresh red oaks had dropped. So I
Yeah.
felt even more confident in going back up to the top of this ridge because I knew there was a bunch of old red oaks there. And that's exactly what they were doing. They came in feeding on those red oaks that had dropped the night before. Those two went past, the three stayed right there. And I heard a grunt out in the CRP. And so I'm just sitting there for like 16 minutes, just waiting, just like this, just holding, holding on to the release and just holding tight to this little hackberry tree that I'm in. And all of a sudden, to my right, like they do, just appears, comes in. I'm thinking I'm going to get a perfect shot right after he goes by this big tree. Well, I'm waiting, and he never comes past my vision on the hackberry tree. and or you know, the one I'm sitting in. And so I'm waiting. I'm like, where the heck is he? So finally I lean around and I'm like, oh shit, he's getting squirrely. So then I know, I'm like, all right, it's game on. Like the first shot opportunity I think I get when he turns his head, I'm taking it. And also I still have these does over here too that I got to worry about. So I got these does. I don't exactly know where the two does are that went past me. I'd like to think they were past, but they weren't that far because after I shot him a little bit, they snorted back there. So, but so he goes back to the way he came in, sniffs around, comes out, he's stomping around a little bit, and he turns his head towards the way of the does, towards the CRP, and I'm like, this is it. Go to draw, boom. He cocks his head around, sees me, and I bury the pin. And right as I release it, he snorts and turns. So as I release, I watch the arrow hit his butt and hear the pop. And I was like, you know, he ran away. I'm sitting there in a, adrenaline kind of craze,
Yeah.
like trying to calm down. What just happened? Assess the situation. And uh, I'm like, I need to get down pretty quick because if I hit the artery, he's
Yep.
going to be dead. And if I didn't, he's not going to be dead. So I get down, find great blood, like just spraying immediately from the hit the whole way. And then I get out into the CRP, following him for a couple hundred yards, and then nothing. I'm like, crap. I didn't hit him as good as I thought, blah, blah, blah. I do this big circle around the CRP and come back to first blood and then realized that he had just went off into the woods there instead of following along the CRP. And then I start finding huge things of blood, find my arrow soaked in blood. And then I get to the top of the ridge, find a bed of blood, and I hear something down below, rumbling down below. And I'm like, I just kicked him out of his bed. I kind of make my way down, following more blood, and all of a sudden I see him in the ditch with his head lifted up and about probably 20 yards. And as you saw in the video, finished him off, died instantly. And come to find out, and I don't show that in the video I sent you, but I'm going to try to go more in depth before I release it. It went in the top of the butt, but it came out the uh,
Yeah.
right behind the left shoulder. And so it was actually a great, way better hit than what I thought. So when he turned, instead of being fully sideways, he was at just the right angle that it went all the way through.
Oh,
But
that's amazing.
a lot of luck was in that too, because I was aimed at his vitals and it would have hit his vitals, but at the same time, he was alert, but just facing the other way. I thought I had, I thought I had it. And once I was drew back, I was committed, buried the pin and let it go. Had I have known he was going to snort and turn, I probably wouldn't have released that arrow. And you'll see that in the video. It all happens all at the same time. So
Yeah, it does go pretty quick. I think there's a lot to learn from that video too. One, your tree. That thing was gnarly. I mean, you had some amazing cover in that tree, but it wasn't some giant tree. It was a smaller diameter tree that had a bunch of different limbs coming up. And I mean, and you had those deer, those does came in. How far were they from you?
probably 30 to 40 yards,
Okay.
maybe a little further out there on that line there, but as they came in, they were probably 40-ish yards, maybe.
How high are you at that point?
Probably 15. Usually I'm roughly 15 foot. I always try to match the cover, as you know, like, everybody in
Hmm.
the mobile hunting community knows, like, you don't have to be high, you don't have to be low, but um, I would say on average, I am three sticks with three 17-inch sticks with 8ers high. Now,
Yep.
sometimes they're higher, sometimes lower. Sometimes I use an extra 8er on the bottom, like I pull out an extra daisy chain that I'll keep to make an extra 8er on there or something like that. But generally, I'm three sticks with 8ers high.
And are they higher than you though? Are you down the ridge a little bit and they're coming in higher? I can't tell in the video.
So they're a little bit lower, but the ones up on the top of the ridge are kind of level.
Okay.
But where I expected the deer to come and the bucks to come from was going to be coming down, and I needed something that I was far enough away from where they were at, had enough cover, but still was able to get that shot off. And there wasn't another tree that was in the right spot that worked for the wind. Because with that west wind, if I'd have been any closer, when he might have smelled me right when he got close. So I needed to be. You still want to be off of that trail a little bit, and so that was why that tree was selected. But then because I was in a skinny little tree, I got up to where there was limbs shooting out, and then that way I could sneak around and shoot outside of it. And I knew that I was shooting for that one trail that moving up that hill. So I had to have that side open. and the other side I didn't care as much about.
I
I mean,
think
I could
the
swing around and shoot the backside of that, but I wasn't gonna be able to, like, pull over and shoot to the right of that. I was planning on that spot right there being where I was gonna get the shot.
I think the art of being still too is overlooked quite a bit, for you to have that many deer in there. I know he got you on the draw, which man, that's happened to me sometimes, and I just don't know how they do it. I'm just like,
Those old deer, man, they're not the same, so
yeah, yeah. But to be able to do all that and get to where you got, and you can see it in the video, man. You're sitting there, still as can be, with all that movement. The cover helps definitely, but how about the hybrid setup? Like, how are you using it? Because I think it's kind of a newer concept for people right now with the saddle and something like the point five. Are you ever sitting down on it, or are you using it for a knee pad? I guess the seat. But go ahead and explain kind of how you had it set up that day.
yeah, it's funny, I was about to go into that because so, one of the biggest, like, the biggest advantages to me is being able to have that seat flip down, put my knee on it, and it keeps me out further from the tree.
Mm,
So it helps stabilize me out further from the tree. So then I can make less movement looking around the tree. If I'm up close, I have to move more of my body around the tree, creating more movement. So I want to go and see if a deer is there and he's there and he sees me move. Whereas if I just got my knees on that seat when it's in the down position, like the seat's down, and then I put my knees up against it like that, and then I'm locked in, and all I have to do is kind of just slightly check my head. You know what I mean? So, and in that situation, it was crucial because I had my bow sitting right there, rested on my knee, knees in there, locked, in that tiny little tree. There was no room for error or movement because I knew there was a lot of eyes, and I also knew that there was a good possibility that a buck was going to pop up on me. So I had to remain as still as I could, and that for me anyway, in just a traditional stance, standing there for a long time, your knees start to wear out, your arms start to get tired of holding your bow. I mean, you can rest it on your bow hook, excuse me, but I like to have everything ready to go for when they come in. So for me personally, I want to just be ready to just draw and shoot.
yeah, I'm hearing more and more of that. I don't do that. I would, if I'm in my saddle, my bow's right there. It's hanging on on the tree, and I it's just a little movement. But if I'm in a stand, I tend to have it on some type of hook. Right now, I'm using the one that comes on the bottom of the point five. It kind of swings out, and I'm worried about that because there's a lot of movement getting it out and ready if it were to happen right away. During those critical times, always got the bow, but during the rut, I mean, that could be any time.
Hmm.
So, but what I've heard a lot of guys who are really successful with taking big deer, and that bow is on the ready all the time. They're holding it, and it's in their hand, and they're ready to go. That's
If I
that's
if
interesting.
it, and also with the hybrid setup too, I will use it like a hybrid for about 4 years now. I started using a 1.0, and then I've used the point 0.5 for the past 3 years now. And, like, you couldn't get me to go back to any other way. And I think it's one of those things that it it's one of those things that's hard for people to wrap their head around it until they do it, until they do it a few times and go, "Hey, wait a minute." I see it now because it's really hard to understand. People go, "Well, why would I wanna carry the stand and all the saddle?" But it's really more about weight distribution and options and making everything easy and flow better. So for me, you're adding what, a couple pounds and carrying a stand over a platform, but you also can use it as a backpack. Like I don't carry a backpack in.
Yep.
I just put my clothes on the backpack and my sticks, and then I carry everything else in pouches on the side, and then a bino harness. And then the only reason I carry the bino harness is for my self filming stuff. So if I didn't self film, I wouldn't need my bino harness and I wouldn't need my fanny pack that I run underneath my like I run around my waist, but it kind of acts as a waist belt underneath my point five. So it's one of those things where it sounds like it's more, but when you think about what you actually get out of it, you're really not adding but a couple more pounds to get a lot more value.
Yep.
So for me, when I go and I look at a tree, it's like, okay, well, that one sets up really well for a tree stand, like setup, a traditional tree stand setup. So I actually wear a tree stand harness underneath my saddle.
Yep.
And so then I can be like, all right, well, that one sets up really well for a tree stand. I can hunt it that way. This one sets up really well for a saddle. I can hunt it that way. It just doesn't limit me in anything. I can just go out there, freely hunt, and do whatever I want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good to hear because we get stuck in our ways, especially saddle hunting. I've saddle hunted for 16 years and I was pretty hard-headed about it for 16 years. Like like this is all that I'm going to do. I'm going to do saddle. And I went to it not with that in mind. I went to it because everything back then was super heavy. And, the saddle just made way more sense to me because it was light and I actually enjoyed it. And then I kinda got introduced to the point five, and once I picked that thing up, I thought, "Okay, this might be a game changer for me," and now I'm kinda bouncing back and forth. I tried doing the hybrid thing one time this year, and, I didn't stick with it too long. I went back to the using the saddle or not the saddle, excuse me, the just the point five alone. But I would always I'd have my saddle with me in case I was gonna do it, but I just never ended up doing it. I just was intrigued that the stand made sense, but so back to the hunt. You finish off this deer. I mean, it's magnificent deer. Is there anything else you want to point out about that hunt before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, one, a lot of you guys that are starting out, and me included when I was starting out, I carry a grunt call. I carry a can call with me. I don't ever carry rattling horns anymore. But like a lot of guys, and my younger self included, would have heard that grunt and thrown a grunt out.
Yes.
And knowing that I have deer there, knowing that I am downwind of those deer, and knowing that he's already frisky out there, the last thing I want to do on a dead calm day is draw attention to myself. So I remain completely still and quiet, right? I already have the deer there. I have the live decoys right there eating their acorns, getting fat. Why would I want to draw any attention to myself whatsoever? Just sit back and let it happen, right? So if I could just point something out, is we all want that easy magic button, magic pill, all that stuff. And a lot of the times we look at that as what, like the grunt call and the calls and the sense. And there's a time and a place for everything. But as you go on and you start wanting to kill big bucks, you learn when that time is and when it's not.
I'm so glad you said that. I actually wrote it down because I noticed that in your video. And I was going to ask you, and I totally forgot to ask. That was, yeah, I did notice that right away. And I was thinking of myself and what I would do in that situation. And even to this day, I'd be so tempted to grab, especially you said you waited 16 minutes
Yep.
before he came in. I would have been
Well,
so tempted to grunt.
I also didn't want to draw attention from the does.
Yeah. Yep. That makes
So
sense.
So maybe if 16 minutes had went by and I'd heard a lone grunt, I might have thrown a grunt out.
Hmm.
But having all those does
Yep.
right there, and as calm as it was, those big, if you're after that upper age class of buck, if you're after a 2 or 3 year old, maybe throw a grunt out. But if you're after that, 4 or 5, 6 year old deer, whatever, yeah, it's not like we know what they are when we're looking at them.
Yeah.
But if you are after that age class of deer, and you have to understand that they've heard a million times before those grunts, and you don't sound like a deer no matter how hard you try. So oftentimes they'll come in curious, but not like they would to a regular deer, because a deer is running, grunting, you know, doing other things than just a solo weird sounding grunt up in a tree. And so you get a big buck, he comes in, the does are on alert looking up at a tree. He's going to run and snort before I ever even got drawn. So
Yeah.
if he came in at all.
I'm gonna go out and feel free to disagree with me here, but you said something. You said if you're going after a 2 or 3 year old, then go ahead and maybe try that out. There, I'm gonna go out and say there's two different tact or like approaches for those type of deer. For the younger deer, you're gonna hunt those differently than you're going to hunt these older, more mature deer.
Mhm.
Um, would you agree with that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
The reason why I say it is because a lot of podcasts, and it's actually one of the reasons why this one got started, is there's some awesome hunters out there just killing booners and like the tactics and the work, and I think you had to put in work at every level, but what they're doing isn't necessarily what you need to do if you're trying to get a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old buck. And I think sometimes when we talk about these more mature deer, and I love talking about them, um we can frustrate people because it's like, man, I can't do that. Like I'm not even close to being able to do that, and you almost I found myself in my journey almost wanting to give up sometimes because I thought, if that's what it takes, I can't right now. My life doesn't allow me to do that. And then I found out,
Mhm.
oh, wait a second. I can go after this age class and it's a lot of fun, you know. And then when the time is right, then I can move up. But so I appreciate you pointing that out.
There's a huge difference. However, when targeting more mature deer, you're gonna run into those smaller deer more. So
Ah,
I think that there's value to be had in the newer guys or the guys who haven't reached that level in trying to kind of mimic some of the things that the guy chasing the older age class is. But there's also things that you can get away with or places that you can hunt consistently if that's all you're trying to do.
mhm,
But I know everybody's always trying to swing for the fences every time they go out, and they haven't put that 120 down. Well, the other part to that is if you haven't ever been to the Super Bowl and that's the first game you play, you're not going to win that game,
yeah,
right? Most of the time. So, in my opinion, it's good to work your way up the ranks because there's a business guy I follow, Alex Hormozy, and he says that if confidence doesn't come from screaming affirmations into the mirror at yourself, it comes from building an undeniable stack of evidence that you know what you're talking about, right? And so if you get to shoot a booner, and that's the only deer you're ever shot, hypothetically, you're going to be scared shitless. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to have set up correctly. You're going to do things like grunt at the wrong time, and you're going to shit that. You're going to shit the bed on that.
yeah.
So it's just it is a slow progression needs to happen because without the work, you're not going to have the consistent success. And the work is years of rising that ladder on the smaller to bigger deer.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So moving on, you that's the last day of your vacation. You get it done, and then you have to go back for work for how long?
So I had to go back to work. There was a day off in there where I took my wife and kid to a private piece, a family private piece. We sat in a blind. Didn't ever see any deer, but we had bucks grunting and chasing all around, and they got to sit there and blow their grunt tube and bleat calls like 50 times. And they would come into the edge and never come in, but they don't want to see me kill anything anyway. So it was a lot of fun, and it's always nice to just have them out there, even though I end up probably screaming at them more than I should to be quiet. But that's just kind of the nature of the beast. I shouldn't say scream, but just very sternly,
Yeah,
how do you guys make this much noise? How is that possible for two human beings to make this much noise? But we laugh while we're doing that. You know what I mean? It's always them like giggling way too hard while I'm getting like red faced. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So anyway,
I love that about you, by the way. It stands out in a lot that you do. I wrote down at the top of my notes, family. Like,
yeah,
it's evident that family's first for you and that they're very important, and just little things through, like, your videos, like calling your wife, and, I don't know if it was this kill or the next one, but I remember you saying something like, "Hey, be careful getting home so that we can celebrate this thing," like, you're concerned about them. I just love it, man. Like, I
yeah,
really
yeah,
respect that a lot.
dude, I yeah. So before I go into the next hunt, and I think we talked about it too before we started this. So guys out there that are young, that are don't have a family yet, stuff like that, and you get to hunt a lot, right? And you place this huge amount of importance on killing that buck, and it becomes your persona and everything. And when it doesn't work out, it crushes you, it destroys you, right? We've all seen the meme of the guy laying on the couch
Yeah.
smoking cigarettes 5 years after missing a giant buck, right? Well, part of part of killing big bucks is not giving them too much power, right? Over who we are and all that. So having a full life outside of deer hunting, like we talked about, is really really important because whether I kill that buck or not doesn't matter to me at the end of the day. I have my family to fall back on. I have other things that I you know enjoy, and it's not just all of who I am, right? So if I was to have missed that deer or shot that deer in the butt and I didn't have anything else to fall back on, that would have crushed me, right? Young guys listening, and you think, man, I just want to hunt all the time. Well, I lived it. I used to quit jobs to go hunting all the time, this and that, and inevitably at the end of it, you always felt hollow and like just kind of like, all right, what now? I've lived that dream and it didn't fulfill me, whether I was successful or not, right? So you really need to try and set your life up not to just be whitetails 100% of the time. Even though, like I said in the beginning, I'm addicted.
Yeah.
I can't not think of whitetails, and I have to force myself sometimes to put myself in family mode, but I wouldn't be any kind of deer hunter without my family. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. I actually had to walk away from deer hunting for like 7 years because it I was so obsessed about it and it was so part of my identity. And here's the funny thing is I was horrible at it.
yep.
And I think I was bad at hunting because I was so stressed out. I mean, and I by the way, I was a miserable person to be around in hunting camp. There's my buddies listening to this right now that are gonna, be laughing out loud and they know it's true. And because I was so stressed out all the time, I wasn't having fun.
Rainy day lear, he's back.
Yeah. Always. It was always something wrong. Everything wasn't right, everything had to be perfect. I was so negative in my mindset. And I think it really stopped me from one, enjoying what I loved, and two, actually being successful. And eventually my wife just came to me and said, "Look, you got to make a decision here," and I made the decision. I walked away. And then she came back to me and was like, "All right, like it's time for you to go back." And I know that sounds crazy. You're gonna be like, "Man, that's a crazy." No, she's the best wife in the world. She actually did us a favor. And when I went back, and it took me a couple years, but I stopped making it my identity. And when
Yep.
I stopped making it my identity, the more and more that onion peeled off, the more successful I got, the more I enjoyed what I was doing, and the more my wife enjoyed what I was doing. And so anyways, I hate when the host talks too much, but I just wanted to really hit on that with you. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you said worst hunter. It's like the other side of that coin too is when it is your whole identity and it's not working out,
Yeah,
you begin to point fingers at other people, other things. Why is it not working out? Well, it's the out of staters. Well, it's the landowners. It's the guys who get to hunt over here. It's everything but us, right?
yep,
And when we accept responsibility for our own actions, that's when we start to grow, right? So
yep,
when it's not working out and you're pointing fingers at other people, you're really not doing yourself any service because you're not growing at all. You're putting the blame somewhere else.
yep,
And I used to be this like wild scent control fanatic, and like you couldn't come around after I had gotten ready, and you couldn't get in my car if you smelled a certain way, if you were smoking a cigarette, this and that and the other. And it's just laughable because I was trying to replace skill with being maniacal about the things that didn't matter.
yeah,
And so you need to just really assess what you put importance on in your life and in hunting, because where you put your attention is where you're going to see results, whether it's good or bad.
yep, yep, 100%. So second hunt,
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, Went off on a tyrant there, but
that's good.
so second hunt. And also, I want to say, so there's this other quote where guys who are hardcore and driven often feel like the guys who aren't, the guys who are just not really that in, 1 foot in, feel like maybe they kill something and they've done enough. But the guys who are driven and crazy, they might reach a level of those guys only dream of and still feel like they haven't done enough, right?
Mhm,
And so I was actually started off the season. I had jumped and have video of like 160, 170-inch deer that I was out scouting. And I was going up this long finger, going up this hill overlooking this bean field. And there was some transition cover and there was oaks dropping. The first oaks I saw going up that hill, and they were loaded and was dropping into this transition cover. And I said, there's definitely a bed in there. No sooner had I said that than I look up and I see a big giant deer sitting there in the weeds, just watching me like a rabbit, waiting for me to keep going. And what's crazy is the wind was going straight for me to him. So he had known I was there for a while. Just those old deer know that if they sit tight 99% of the times, you're going to go right on by them and they don't have to give away their location. So, but anyway, I had threw up a cell cam, made a mock scrape inside that, got him and another 10 pointer the next morning, got him a couple weeks later, a couple weeks. I wasn't sure because it was beans, and I wasn't sure if he was going to stay in that area, blah, blah, blah. But he was my target in the beginning. And even though I killed these two deer, another guy killed that deer in between there that I didn't know about. But it's funny because when I started getting busted going after him, I fell back on places that I knew better and knew I had a better chance of success. So while I look at it as a successful season as a whole, and I believe that things happen the way they're supposed to happen, I also look at it like I shouldn't have fell back so easy from that spot because he was killed right by there. I should have thrown more time and resources into killing that bigger deer. Instead, I don't want to say I took the easy route, but I fell back on things I knew had a lot better chance at working out.
Mhm.
So when I was going into this hunt, it was going after him and another deer that I had historical data from the year before, which was a big 11 pointer. I didn't know for sure if I was gonna find that one big deer that ended up getting killed, but it was on the very southern part of where I thought I could see him at. And it's actually funny because the 11 pointer that I had historical data with that I was in this bedding area for pushed me to go north and I found him. And then in pushing north, I found this other deer, which is the one that I eventually ended up killing. So you just never know how these
Yeah.
things are going to stair step on top of each other. But basically, uh, I know that there is a X of terrain inside of cover. So just on a ridge system that has oaks on one side, and then you have this kind of has points coming down off of the CRP on the other, and then a ridge system that comes to an X, but it's CRP. It's not the oaks. So you have transition, you have terrain, and then you have cover or food, excuse me. And so you have all of this stuff, and it's not too far from the road. So what happens is guys go in deep rut hunting, especially your out of staters and stuff like that. They get in. Everybody wants to go deep, go to your main funnels, and they end up pushing them back to these
Yeah.
bedding areas that get closer to the road. So I find a lot of success in that. Now the other one was killed way far away from a road, so there's no one way to skin a cat, but a lot of the times that pressure pushes them up closer to the road, and that's when those bedding areas start to get hot too. So go into an area where I had never picked out a tree. Just knew that there was a red oak cluster kind of in there. And I go in the dark and there's all this crap and I'm kind of fighting through all this thicket. And then I see the tree. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get shots out of it, but I get up in it anyway and sit there for 10 hours. I saw a bunch of deer leading up to that, but no big buck. And about 3:20, I hear a grunt and look over. He'd already passed me 35 yards. I grabbed my bow, grabbed my camera, main angle camera, put it on him, pull back. I got one opportunity before he's gone, and I let it fly at 40 yards and heart shot him, crashes off, and the rest is history. So
So yeah, that you are in are you in bedding? Because that was some thick stuff that you were in
yes,
there. You're like right in it. You're not on the outside of it.
right, and that's what I say is you're gonna hunt different. Like I've killed deer pre-rut a couple hundred yards away on the outside of that. Okay,
Mhm.
but in this particular situation, I had a north wind coming. I have that X on the terrain in the CRP there, right by the oaks. I know that there's a high probability that bucks, especially on November 9th, are leaving their does. They're they're going to be more reckless going through doe bedding than what they would on November 1st. November
Mhm.
1st, it just seems like they're going to be a little bit more methodical about how they go around the edges and stuff like that. A lot of times, I had a good feeling that I was going to have something come through there, and that wind was just perfect, blowing away from that X and down the hill. So it's just one of those things where you kind of have to have seen it and play out and understand what they're going to do at different times of the year and go in and capitalize. Because I had cameras late October, camera pictures when I went later after I killed him of him running those transition lines on the oaks. And on the edge, I had him on the second or November 2nd or yeah, November 2nd. And I had him like October 27th. So on both edges, I had him out there. But as you get into that core, he came straight through the middle of it. So
Mhm.
he's looking for a doe that might be laying down trying to hide in that thick stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Are you is there a risk factor there still? I mean, is there a chance they can come from behind you?
There was, but there was also the parking lot was that way, even though they still will come that way. There was another dude who, as I was leaving the parking lot, said he was going to go sit where one of the main entrances was, where I picked up that 11 pointer. So I felt like anything coming from that way was either going to be running from him or cut off by him. So for me, it was like I'm just going to cover this X, and he can have that spot over there.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason why I asked that is because a lot of times, like I find myself calculating the risk and saying, okay, is the risk worth it? Like I've got 75% up here, I'm good. I got 25% behind me that, they could go through. But right now at during this time of the season, with the wind and everything that's going on, I'm going to take that risk and I'm going to go in. The old me wanted to be 100% free. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I wanted to set up in a way which was such a fairy tale to think in your head that you actually can do that, but it would what happened then is I would be way out of the game because I wanted to make sure I wouldn't get busted. And now I'm trying to have a calculated risk factor, I guess is what I would call it.
Well, and so that's where that early season mentality versus rut mentality comes in, because I had been busted in that bedding area earlier in the year, right?
Hmm.
And in those areas where I was headed, oh, I gotta remind me later update. But so in those areas where uh, I was headed, I had busted deer out of, and it wouldn't have been the right move if they were bedded in those same spots on that same day. But my thought process at that point is that bucks are cruising larger loops, right? So even if I had busted something out of there, I don't feel as though I am still killing my chance at killing a big buck, because at any point in the day something can change in there. And as long as I have the terrain, the time of year, and the wind in my favor, to me that's the calculated risk factor is moving more in my
Yep.
favor. And I don't feel like bucks are bedded down before dark as much either, so you're not bumping them out of there. Whereas even up into late October, they can be. And I busted a big buck out of there on a couple hundred yards away because I was hunting that fringe. And so I feel like, yes, there is some risk, and that doesn't mean that there's no such thing as always or never in deer hunting.
Hmm.
But if I know that there's a phenomenal doe bedding and it sets up just right for the wind, well, I might have to bump some deer, but I'm sitting
Hmm.
there all day and I'm sitting there for a week. You know what I mean? Until I'm not seeing deer.
Yep.
And that's another thing too that I wanted to touch on, is a lot of people in the mobile hunting game get so caught up in moving too much because they don't see deer. That first deer that I killed, I had sat for like 4 or 5 days in a row
Hmm.
and had not seen a big deer. But again, I trusted my data, I trusted my scouting and my understanding of the deer and deer behavior. And so that time of year, especially around does, bucks are going to have their little spots, like I said, where they bed, spots where they go and check more regular. Well, then as you move to that November 9th, it expands, right? Their range that they're checking is expanding because those does are already getting bred. So they're going further and further out from the regular doe groups. And not to say that they don't know these other doe groups and you haven't had pictures of them there, but you're not getting them every day. You're getting them once every week. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because they're just coming through and making that round looking for a doe that's coming in. So that's the thing is as you go on in this, guys who aren't as what do you say, experienced, just because you don't see something in a spot one day doesn't mean that you can't sit there again. Whereas I know a lot of the mobile hunting community is pushed towards jumping around, and that will change the game. And it is huge to hunt where the deer are. If you know the deer are there, you can't always just ride off a spot in one sit.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think. Last 2 years jumping around has helped me a lot, but it's because I'm going to a place I didn't know, each time. And I in the past I'd find myself sitting too long in an area and the rut's going on the other side of the property, and it's
Yep.
not happening here. And I've got only so many days to hunt. So in that situation, I feel more comfortable going in and bouncing around. If I have more time and I know the property more, then I'm more apt to sit longer and wait for that movement to come through, especially if it's a really good pinch point. Even then, if it's a piece of property I don't know, but I feel really confident about that pinch, I'm going to sit there. I'm going to wait it out until something comes through, And I
And
think
that's
that,
where confidence comes in, and you can't fake that. That has to be built, and it can only come from hunting or running cameras or both, right?
yeah,
And scouting, right? So when you have those three things working in unison, and you go, I don't care what happened the 3 days before, I know this is a good spot. I'm going to die on this hill. And then, it works out. Well, you go, shit, if I'd have jumped around, this probably would have never happened. So
Yeah, yeah, agree. And the cameras you were talking about earlier about how the cameras don't actually they're not what we're using to kill, but they give me the confidence. I mean, I can think I have killed a couple bucks that I've had on camera. One of them I targeted because I had him on camera, and I think that helped me kill him. But most of the time, I just feel good about being there because I know I've got good bucks on camera. And so if
absolutely.
and that's where like even that's why when I go out of state, I'll go in and I'll dump a bunch of cameras. I mean, if that's where I'm going to go for the rut, I'll put out 15 cameras on that piece of public just so I can build up confidence. And sometimes it's a false confidence and I want it. So sometimes it's the summer bucks that I'm getting on camera that they're probably going to relocate. Some of them are going to relocate. I don't care. I feel good because they're there. And I've scouted it. I know it's going to be good for the rut. And now I've got good confidence because I know there's big bucks in the area. That's all I
Well,
need.
I even those big deer that relocate come back and revisit
Yeah.
those bedding areas
Yep.
in the rut. And so I used to write off the summer bucks because they didn't stick around. But and you can watch other guys, Don Higgins, other guys that talk about this in depth. But um, it's crazy once you start running cameras how you realize that there's really no surprise bucks. Because if you really go back and look, they've been there before. They
Yeah.
just weren't core area bucks to that area. But that when
Yep.
they start expanding their core area to go out and look for those does, they end up in those bedding areas. And I talked about this before too. Like, on dispersal and buck dispersal or young buck dispersal. I think too that oftentimes that buck, he goes out, but he spent his first year and a half with does. He understands intimately how does act in bed, and so even if he's out to an area he's never been before, he knows how to work those hills. He knows where to go to find the does, and he uses his nose as well. Obviously, going down in those bottoms, sucking it in. So I think that a lot of the times people think that there's these bucks that just pop up, but they've been there before. They know the program,
Yeah.
and it's not their first rut either. So they just know when to come into those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a spot over here. I was just talking about this on the last podcast that the last week and a half of December, it fills up with bucks, and they're different bucks than what are there usually. And there's this core doe group over there, and they kind of making their rounds towards the end of December, and just kind of I think it's a little bit of rut activity. It's not like it's a full blown rut like it is in November, but they're just poking through there, seeing what's going on with them, and then they move out. They're only there for a few days, but it's so consistent every year. I've ran cameras there for 4 years, and I see it every year.
And so just to kind of add on to the debate of the cell cam thing, just a
Hmm.
small snippet. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Um, if you said to me, I will give you 5 cell cams or 30 SD cams, I would take the 30 SD cams
Hmm.
every day of the week because I kill more deer off historical data than I do off of right now data.
Yep.
Like up until that last buck, that 10 pointer, I had not killed a deer that I had on cell camera.
Hmm.
So, and that one didn't even really help me kill that deer because I killed him a couple hundred yards away from where I had him on camera and on the second where I killed him on the ninth. So it's not like I saw his picture, and he wasn't even daylighting either. It was 4:20 in the morning,
Yep.
so I didn't have a daylight picture. It was a week before, and it was a couple hundred yards away. But I did shoot that deer coming back into that bedding area searching. So I just think that people don't understand how to properly use the data. And they think that the best thing is going to, I honestly think that cell cams hurt because they don't force you to sit down and analyze the data on a
Yes.
large scale because when I have to sit there and manually for half an hour go through every picture, it forces me to see what happened throughout that whole season. Whereas I'm getting pictures and I'm saving them, I build this in my mind, this thought of what happened through the season. And often it's not the case. Like
Yep.
in my mind, because I saw 2 big bucks in there that were huge, in my mind, that's a big buck hotspot. But then I go back and look, and that was, 2 of 4 big bucks that were in there all season. I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time in there, but I'll look around somewhere else that maybe they're frequenting more often.
Yeah, yeah, I've felt the same way with cell cams. Actually, sometimes on the reverse side, I actually feel like sometimes I've missed stuff because I have, I run 15 cell cams, and I didn't do that. I didn't think through that. I went out and just started buying cameras left and right. And I thought, well, cell cams got to be the better way to go. And I agree with you. Now, after running them for about 3 years, I prefer the SD camera for that reason. I feel like I get a really good picture of the year as I work through it. With the cell cams, both things have happened to me. One, I thought it was like a better spot than what it actually was, just because I had a couple of days of, bucks moving through there. Two, sometimes I have so many pictures coming across that I'm thinking I'm going to remember what I looked at, and I don't.
Right.
And then I'll pull that card at the end of the year and I'll go through it like an SD card. And all of a sudden I realize, man, I really missed out on some data here that, where if I would have just put SD in there, ran it for the year, I'd feel way more comfortable going into next year. And the cell cams, I wasn't paying as much attention to the SD cards until last year after realizing I was missing data. I kind of put those aside at the end of the year and thought, no, I got it on my phone. I know what happened there. And I'm like, oh no. And then the other part is, oh, I missed all these bucks. Like there's some don't even get sent to me. I mean, a
Right.
good number, like almost 50% sometimes on some cameras.
Well,
That
that's another reason why I will put more than one camera in an area and on multiple trails, because if one of them gets out, one of them gets stolen, one of them doesn't send pictures, I want to get an idea still. I don't want to miss a whole year's data. But to elaborate on your point about the cell cams, and you bought 15 of them, so I always try to explain to people, just emphasize, like, our brains are computers, right? And we have a finite amount of energy every day that we can give to anything, right?
hmm
And we can also only process so much information effectively. So if you have 15 cameras reporting to you every day, and every day you're trying to compute what the best thing to do is, you're going to overthink and you're going to make bad decisions.
Yep.
And if you're sitting at work and you're getting reminded of deer, if you're at your house getting reminded of deer, and it takes away that time for your brain to relax and not process that information. So for me, I use them. I use them for inventory purposes. I'm not trying, like, there are times where you're like, oh, well, now they're getting active in this bedding area. I could go hunt that. But more than likely, my scouting has led me to already know that. Usually,
hmm
I'm
hmm
just I'm just trying to find certain bucks that are hitting those. But like my soakers, my SDs, those are going into a lot of unknown spots where it could be good. Based off of different things like this fence crossing coming off of this private ag field going over here, are deer using this and how often are they using that? And then that'll tell me this backside of this bedding area is getting used more than this other side. So, and I can sit there and effectively really analyze that data. Whereas, like I said, you got 15 different cameras sending you pictures all the time. It really starts to overwhelm you, I think,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying there. Yeah, one thing to do to mitigate some of that stuff too is I found that happening. I was like, oh, I'm, looking at my phone all the time. Is I just set them to report to me at one time of the day,
Yep.
and then I had them separated by 5 minutes each. So there was like, there's an hour there where it's hitting me, and but this year I'm actually going back. I'm selling them, and then I'm going to buy five good ones, five good cell cams, and the
Hmm.
rest I'm running SD. Because I just it hasn't benefited me to run that many cameras. It was too much distraction, and I couldn't really organize the data correctly. So
It's more money, it's
hmm
more distraction. I set mine to half of them send at night, half of them in the morning. So then I just get hit as I wake up.
hmm
I get some data, and before I go to bed at night, 8, 9 o'clock, I get some data, and then that way I'm not getting woke at night. But I do change it during the rut,
so do I.
only because it's fun to, oh, there's a deer, there's a deer.
hmm
But the most of the time they're set on
hmm
that period. But again, when you set it to instant, it's harder to analyze the data, especially in the rut, because you, by the time you get that picture of that deer, it's too late.
hmm
So because they're on 3 to 5 day loops, and then like I said, they go to 5, 7 day loops as the rut goes on. So yeah, you got that deer in there, but when's he going to be back? It's
Yep.
not going to be. It's not going to matter if you got it at 3 o'clock that day, because you might not get to use it for a week. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep. Yep. So with that spot you were in, that was the ninth. Is that correct? The ninth?
That was, yeah, November 9th. Yep.
Okay. Would you have sat in that spot on the first?
No,
Yeah.
because like I said, I would have sat the fringe of bucks scent checking that and hitting scrapes and stuff like that. I That's why I waited on that.
Yep.
Also, on another side of that, away from just scouting and that, the camera told me that there was a big deer in there the year before, November 11th through the 17th. He showed up once on the 11th, 17th, and I don't know how much else he was in there, but that's what that one SD camera told me last year. So he was probably 50s 11 pointer, maybe bigger. He was really thick, really old, and then I had that other one that I had picked up, and I thought maybe I was at the southern. And then I had, in looking for that first one, had found the one that I shot, but he only showed up on a cell cam north on a hub scrape on September 18th. And then I didn't realize it was the same deer. I thought it could be that showed up on the south side of that bedding area over on a doe bedding area scrape on the transition area thicket on that X of movement. And so, but he showed up on the second, but it was in the dark. And again, I'm not waiting. I'm not necessarily, they don't have to daylight for me to kill them on a camera, but I do want to feel like I'm maximizing my odds when I push into the center of a bedding area.
Yep.
So I want to know that there are big deer on their feet. And historically, I knew that there was a big deer, a really big deer that I wanted to shoot on his feet at that same time period.
Yep. And you sat all day
Yep.
and
And
started to
that
get started to get a little squirrely towards the end there.
loopiness, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do a lot of all day sits?
Yeah. And so my view on that, again, risk versus reward, is if I'm in the right spot, I will. And there are times where also, though, like say I've done a couple all day sits in a row, and say the weather's about to be perfect in the day, and I have a day in the middle of my vacation, I might sleep in that morning and just hunt an afternoon, or take a whole day off, relax, hang out with the family, get my mind right, come back to center, and then hit it again, because those all day sits destroy us old guys, man.
Yeah.
Uh, no matter how in shape you are or what, you sit in a saddle and on a stand for 12 hours, you're feeling it. So,
Yeah, for sure. There's 2020 I hunted Missouri and I was doing all day sits every day. And I think day 8, man, I was so cranky and so just pissy, that it just ruined it for me. And I was hurting,
I
and
know,
like
man.
normally I can, I'm an old guy, but I could fly up the tree, And day 8, I couldn't get up the first stick, and I was having problems. And man,
Well,
it just it ruined it for me. I should have took some time, but I was back in, I was afraid that that morning that I didn't go out was going to be my one chance, And
and you watch the video, the first one, the one morning I took off, a
yeah,
giant buck shows up after I'd sat in the rain for 13 hours. So I sat in the rain without rain gear for 13 hours, grabbing my nuts to stay warm, freezing. Couldn't even pull my bow back at one point. At one point, I went to draw back my bow, couldn't do it. Kept working that muscle, finally got it back, turned to point at a spot I would have shot, and there was a small buck standing there staring at me, and he bounds away. And I'm just like, what a kick in the stomach.
yeah,
And later, a doe kind of did the same thing, caught me moving a branch I was using as cover. So I am just getting pummeled, rained on, just horrible. And so the next day, I'm like, dude, I got to take a break. And of course, boom, cell cam pick bright and early. There he is, man, in all of his glory, right there where I was all day the day before. So sometimes they can hurt you, but
yeah,
oftentimes being awake, aware, and ready to assess the situation and draw properly and all that stuff, it's worth it to take that rest time period. Often I'll take a morning off, hunt an afternoon, all day sit, maybe another all day sit, morning off, something like that. So I'll alternate, because you try to do all day, all day, all day, all day. At some point, it's a diminishing returns, right? Like
hmm
you're not making the right decisions at all, and
you're moving more in the stand,
you're going to feel even more like crap when you screw it up because you knew better.
Yep. Yeah. I screwed it up that Missouri example. Day 10, I had a good buck come in and just tired and wore out and drew when I shouldn't have. And he busted me and walked backwards and took off. So
Then you
yeah.
feel like somebody just beat your butt. And then, so the other thing too is my wife always gives me a hard time because every year I come home, I'm all crippled up when I get everything all undone and everything put away and reorganized. And I'm trying to get up the stairs, my body ain't working right. And she'll always, I always tell her, like, honey, I swear those hills are getting bigger.
Yeah,
I
they
don't know
are.
what it is, man. And she's like, oh, you say that every year.
I got quite a few more years on you, so trust me, they do. They get quite a bit they get quite a bit bigger.
Well, I don't feel it till I get home and I get stiff, man.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. I mean, well, no, no, I'm starting to feel it in the field now. But up until probably 2 years ago, I was okay. I'm 46, so
Yeah,
44
I'm
44
30,
is good.
38.
Yeah, yeah. 38, man, I felt like I could do, I could do pull-ups while I was up in the tree still. When
That's,
when you get my age, man, it does start to hurt, but it's
yeah,
part of the fun.
my knee's starting to pop a little weird, so
Yep.
that's starting to concern me. It's not hurting yet, but that's I'm going up the stairs and it sounds like snap crackle pop all the time. So
Yeah, my kid says that about me all the time. S So, anything else from that hunt that you wanna give somebody that they should take away?
yeah. So far too often, watching hunting videos and stuff. Well, and something else that got said online too. I'll touch on. I don't carry a rangefinder.
Mhm.
And so and people will crap on that. They'll be like, "Well, that's irresponsible and this and that." But then I would add to that, if you had somebody who was shooting traditional archery instinctive on here, you wouldn't bat an eye at that.
Mhm.
And I've always found that I like back when I used the rangefinder, it just added another level
Mhm.
of okay, I have to get on this deer, click. Okay, now I have to compute where I think the deer is going to be. Even if you compute trees and stuff ahead of time before that deer gets there, you're still doing a lot more computing than just I go out, I practice in my backyard, I range, like I'll step things off to get my pins right. But after that, I don't ever range when I'm shooting. I just go out in my backyard, pick a spot, and shoot. And I do that all the time. Different elevations, different yardages, whatever. Because when those big deer come in, all I want to be thinking about is putting the pin on him, pulling back, and shooting. So to me, it's kind of like instinctive archery, like traditional archery, but with a compound.
Yep.
And the when I find that I'm the most effective when I pull back, put my pin on something, and let go, rather than sitting there holding, trying to get that perfect thing, letting target panic creep in, and then you're pulling the shot. So um, and it's not, maybe it's not for everybody, but for me, it's weird because I'm so much into technology on the trail cam side, but I'm so minimalist when it comes to everything else. And it's kind of like those guys that shoot the traditional archery, though. They say they just start to feel this connection to the arrow. And that's kind of how I am. Like, all I had to do was see where he was. I took my 40-yard pin, put it a little high on his back, and let it sail, and boom. Now, people will say, like, yeah, but you could misjudge it, blah, blah, blah. I've misjudged things when I had a rangefinder plenty of
Yep.
times. So I just, I'm not saying to not do it if it gives you confidence, but if anybody out there is listening, know that it's not a necessary thing. Sometimes we think things because they're the way that things are done so much. We think that there's no way that it can't be part of the process. And I promise you it can.
So you mentioned not having a bino harness either. So do you bring binos with you?
Yeah, I do, but that's another reason why I wear my safety harness. So I wear a muddy safety harness that doesn't have any metal on metal contact, and then I actually take like bungee cord and put the binos right here off of my safeguard thing, and I'll tuck it in behind my bino harness
Mhm.
because that's where I keep all my GoPro accessories and stuff like that. External battery packs, all that stays right here so that I have it all. I climb my tree, I set it up, I pull my fanny pack around to the front, and then I pull out my main angle camera stuff, and so then that goes back around. And a lot of the times I'll keep the bino harness attached, but often I'll take it off on all day sits
Yep.
and I'll attach it to something else,
Yeah, I do
just
that.
because I don't like it on me if I don't have to. But like you saw in that first video, I had it on me because I had gotten up late, everything was settled, it was quiet, it was super calm. I didn't want to make any extra movements, any extra noise, so I just got set up as quick as I could and left it on. But uh, having I do keep some binos, but they're small binos and they tuck behind. Whereas I wouldn't carry a bino harness if I wasn't carrying GoPro stuff was the point. So really all I would need is my stand, my dump pouches, and my bow.
Yeah. Yeah. I bring the binos. I rarely use them while I'm hunting. I use them when I'm scouting quite a bit.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times where I'm hunting, I'm not always because I it's not always the same situation, but um I'm hunting like it's pretty thick. So by the time I see them, it's almost go time, a lot of times.
Yeah, so I don't use them from the stand too much.
Yep.
Every once in a while I will. If it's a boring all day sit and I want to
Yep.
scan in through thick stuff and maybe pick up some movement, I will. But the biggest reason I bring them is I am methodically working through the woods and maybe I see a rub over here or something I think is a rub.
Hmm.
So I'll bring it up before I get to it. So I don't have to put any ground
Yep.
scent down to get to it. So that's my main reason for bringing them. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bring them just to sit in the stand because it's one extra thing.
Yeah, that's what I like to use them for too. Yep. So as we start to wrap this up a little bit, um, what are a couple takeaways you can give to somebody who's, not to the level that you're at, um, looking to improve their chances? I mean, is there something that you rely on, like if, one or two things that if they just implemented, it would start to increase their odds? And I know it's really broad and it's not one or two things are ever going to really just make it happen.
Hmm.
But is there a piece of advice you could give to somebody that is looking to increase their odds and their abilities?
Well, so like when you started that out saying like to get to where I am, so I don't look at it that way because like I've been in sales for 10 years now, right? I started in farming and then I went to sales. And we have a saying, hero to zero. So every
Yeah.
month, it doesn't matter where you're at, you go back to zero every single month and you're a nobody again at the first of every month. So whenever I'm going into every season, it's weird because no matter how much, what do you call it, success that you have, you always get this weird imposter syndrome feeling where you're like, yeah, I've done it all of these times, but will I be able to
Yeah.
continue doing will I be able to replicate this? Right. And so then all I do is focus on the things that I can control. And that's my attitude in the work. And as you go on, you'll understand where to direct to work more. But that is kind of what I was leading to is if you have a why me mindset rather than a why not today mindset,
Hmm.
you're never going to make it very far. So you can't look at things as happening to you, but rather happening for you. So when somebody steals my trail camera, I don't bitch about it online. What I do is I take that and use it as information and as a positive. Okay, somebody doesn't want me in this area. Somebody's been in this area. Maybe there's a good buck in this area. This maybe I can check these other cameras and see what this guy was keeping me out of here for. So just constantly looking for the positive in every situation is the only way to stay in this game, or you're gonna burn really bright for a little while and then you're gonna peter out because you're gonna realize that it's really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
And it's always funny to me because you get guys from out of state who think that the reason I can kill deer here is because it's Illinois. And then they come here, not saying obviously we got one I'm talking to, did an
No.
amazing job. Hats off to you. You put in the work, you got it done. But anybody that actually comes here and hunts public understands that they don't live under every rock tree
Mm-mm.
and leaf. And yes, they are here. That is the one plus. They are here. Killing them is a totally different thing. So if you come here with the I'm just going to go set up somewhere mindset,
Mm-mm.
yeah, maybe you'll get lucky. I mean, it is Illinois, but it's not it's not what people think until they come here. And deer hunting for mature bucks is not what somebody that's just been hunting deer thinks it's going to be. Because you unfold the layers and realize how intricate this thing is, and you realize that there's no days to be a whiner. Nobody gives
Hmm.
a shit whether you kill a deer or not. Nobody, your wife doesn't care, your kids don't care. I don't care if you kill a deer or not.
Mm-mm.
You have to decide that it is what you want so bad that you're willing to give everything that you have to it. And until you make that decision, you'll kill a good deer every few years. But if you want to kill good deer every year, put the whining aside, put the bullshit aside, look inside yourself and figure out what it is that you can do every day to make your odds better.
I love it. Yeah. Even with my buck, I scouted 150 miles, on that one piece.
Yep.
And I was back there, I don't know how many times, I mean, I was living in my truck, trying to figure that out. So you're right. It takes a lot of work to do it if you want to do it on that level. And, I'm not even trying to pretend like I could do it again, but,
Hey,
um,
man, doesn't matter. You did it. You know what I'm
well,
saying?
but it's
Nobody can
also,
take that from you.
yeah, that's true. And the other part too is you're right. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you shoot a buck like that or if you don't shoot a buck like that. So don't do it for that reason. Do it for your own self development and growth, and enjoy the process. And that's what, because once you kill the deer, you kill the deer. It's done. You have
Yep.
to enjoy the process. You have to enjoy what's going on within you to stay in it. I couldn't agree with you more. And the positive mindset, man, once you embrace that, it's a whole new game, you
It
know?
is, man. And once you tap into how sulking never helped you, like pointing the finger didn't help you, and then so the second a bad thing happens, you immediately put a positive spin on it and then just trudge forward, right?
Yeah.
Like that, it just changes everything that happens. Like another thing that I learned in sales was a guy named Grant Cardone, love him or hate him. He says, I've had lots of bad days, but he said, I turned all my bad days into good days, and that's how you create a good life.
Mm.
So you're gonna have bad shit happen. It's how it's how you react to it.
Yep.
And so are you gonna let that be a bad day, or are you gonna let it turn into a positive and a good day?
Yeah. Oh, so good, man. That's good to end with, actually. So where can people find you?
So I have my YouTube is Good Sit Mobile, as well as my website for my products, like I showed you guys. I do all this because I love it, not because I ever plan on being Michael Waddell or Lee Lakowski or anything like that. I'm happy, content, just being a dad, going to work and making some hunting videos and some products for you guys. So just know that you're supporting a small business. We do it out of our house. A lot of the times, I'm doing it at midnight after I get off. The kids are in bed, and so your products are being made by somebody that cares.
And they're good products. They really are. I can contest to that for sure. And it'll definitely make your life easier. Anywhere else? Are you on social media or anything like that?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, all the regular socials. Good Set Mobile. You can check me out on there. But I've got those two videos coming out. I always try and get a few extra things than just hunt videos out if I can. So do some how tos, maybe some gear stuff, all the goodies that everybody does, with my own spin on it.
Yeah, it's a great YouTube channel, and yeah, I think everybody should go check it out. Awesome videos and some cool how-to stuff for sure. Man, I can't thank you enough, and I'd love to have you on again, and we can talk for hours, man. It was really good. I appreciate it.
I enjoyed it too. I feel like I just, kind of blew everything I had to say though, so I don't know what we're going to talk about next time.
Man, I'm sure there's something. We can go deep on one thing, man. There was a lot there, so good.
Yeah,
Man,
man.
again, thanks a lot. Everybody tune in. We're dropping every Wednesday, and yeah, we'll have another good one next week. So go out there and go check out this Good Sit Mobile site and also the YouTube channel, and learn some new stuff. All right, have a good one.